The Kansas City Chiefs mollywop humdingered the Las Vegas Raiders. And guys, we have some offensive lessons that we can learn from this game. We have offensive lessons that we can learn from this game at every level of the offense. And we're going to start right here with this. This offense really can be as deadly as ever. And when I say as deadly as ever, I mean as deadly as ever. I mean going back to prime Travis Kelce, prime Tyreek Hill, with occasionally Sammy Watkins. I mean all of that. I mean every bit of dangerous that you have ever seen Patrick Mahomes be with this offense. And it does sound a little bit strange to say that after a game where Patrick Mahomes didn't even break 300 yards passing. But we have seen this offense steadily take steps forward this season so far when they did not have their full complement of weapons. Now, we have seen it time and again this year. Week 1, part of the talk leading up to that was that the Chargers were without their offensive lineman. Very good offensive lineman. Got injured, out for the season. It's awful. Week 3, it was talk about how the Ravens were this and that. The defense isn't where it's supposed to be. There may be some injuries. There's some guys who are supposed to be starting. And nothing mattered for the Chiefs. We heard about the Lions being so injured prior to that game. We heard about the Raiders' injuries on offense. All of these things we keep hearing about for other teams, the Chiefs were never extended that same courtesy. And the Chiefs were without their number one wide receiver all basically of last season and all of this season up until this Raiders game. The Chiefs were without Hollywood Brown all of last season until very late, when it's incredibly difficult to come back from an injury and make an impact, an injury like Hollywood Brown had, and make an impact in that same year. Never heard a lick about it from the media. All we heard was how washed it was that Patrick Mahomes was. We are mysteriously still without Josh Simmons, the number 1 pick for the Chiefs this year. We will be going forward without Omar Norman-Lott, the second-round pick defensive tackle who was maybe not playing a whole lot, but was making a real difference on the field, maybe not statistically, but definitely as far as what it meant to be a quarterback playing against that Chiefs defensive line, which we have seen might be the biggest weakness on this entire team. You will not hear those excuses made for the Kansas City Chiefs. Never, not once. You will not hear them. They are continually brought up in defense of the Kansas City Chiefs opponents, as is the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs own the referees for some reason. The NFL loves the idea of the team dominating the NFL for nearly a decade being from one of the smallest markets represented in the NFL. They absolutely love that. They love the fact that the premier team in the NFL exists in flyover country. They love the fact that the best quarterback in the league, possibly in the history of the league, plays for a team that most people think plays in a completely different state. They love that fact, that the quarterback who would be one of the most marketable guys ever if he played for, New York, Dallas, an affable quarterback with a good sense of humor and a funny voice, a deadly arm, scrambling ability, all of these things that would make Patrick Mahomes so very marketable if he were for a big market team. Gosh darn it, don't you know it? He just has to play for those Cowtown Cowboys in the Middle West, not the Dallas Cowboys. It is unfortunate for the NFL that the Kansas City Chiefs are so good, but they're going to have to get used to it, because you can see here that absolute domination against the Raiders came with 0 of these players having a particularly good day. You see nothing here. No one had more than 7 receptions. No one had more than 54 yards. Only Rashee Rice had multiple touchdowns. And still, the offense was graduated to the sidelines by, the third quarter-ish. That is unheard of in the NFL. This offense was so devastating paired with a defense that was absolutely stifling. This offense was so devastating that no one had to do particularly well in order to completely destroy another NFL organization. Now, we saw the Chiefs end the New York Giants quarterback Dangerous Wilson and his run there. I think we saw the Kansas City Chiefs end the Lamar Jackson Harbaugh era in Baltimore. I just don't think we've seen the final nail in that coffin yet. But this will be when things were starting to get pried open there. We've seen the Chiefs change something in Las Vegas. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they're going to switch quarterbacks. I don't know if Pete Carroll is going to retire at halftime in a game. I don't know what it's going to be, but this game will have lasting ramifications for the Las Vegas Raiders because there was nothing. There was nothing that was too great. There was no one that was too great. It was just the steady matriculation down the field. It was just the fact that nothing got going for the Raiders on offense. I know we're here to talk about the Chiefs' offense, but this was such a complete team domination that no one dominated. 54 yards, 42 yards, 42 yards, 39 yards, 35 yards, 35 yards. Now, they had 7 players with 20 or more receiving yards, but 20 or more receiving yards isn't going to win your fantasy league, is it? 7 receptions led the team in a game where it was what would that be? 7, 14, 21, 28. That's a 5-possession victory. A 5-possession victory was won by a team whose leading receiver had 7 receptions or 54 yards, depending on which stat you want to talk about. That is domination. The number 2 thing worth talking about here is something for which Brett Veach is not going to get enough credit. Okay? There is enough talent on the offensive line that a piece or two can miss some time. Again, Josh Simmons was absent. Trey Smith played only 17 snaps. Kingsley Suamataia looked banged up after an extra point. I don't know if he did have something lingering during the rest of that game, but you also saw, for example, Hunter Nourzad get reps. You saw a lot of the backup linemen get reps. It wasn't, with the starting offense, but Mike Caliendo did get starter reps here. Jalen Moore did get starting reps here. There were 2 pieces out from the Chiefs' offensive line. Didn't stop them. Didn't even notice. So, this is a good sign. It is a sign that I think it is tempting to look at the lack of change that, or the persistence of the problem along the offensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs and say Brett Veach doesn't know what he's doing. Well, when you talk about 7 consecutive AFC Championship games, when you talk about 5 Super Bowl appearances, 3 wins, maybe we should give him some credit. The problem is, and it's the same problem that the Chiefs are going to have at defensive tackle, depending on what happens by the trade deadline, you don't get to just manifest your needs. You can't snap your fingers and say, okay, there's a starting offensive tackle out there. They weren't available. And when you go back and you look at how Brett Veach has tried to answer this problem, basically, since he got the job in Kansas City, he's thrown everything at it. Trading a first-round pick for a player, spending a first-round pick on a player, multiple middle round guys, bringing in free agents. You don't get to manifest players. He has finally acquired enough talent and been able to roster it. Remember, Darian Kinnard, starting right tackle for the Packers, was a Kansas City Chief. Didn't make it very long. Well, the problem was he did need time to develop. The Kansas City Chiefs at that point could not afford him the roster spot to develop. That was the issue there. He would be maybe starting for the Kansas City Chiefs today if they had had a little bit more of a roster, a little bit more roster availability. The number 3 thing worth talking about here is this. The Chiefs' rushing attack might not be particularly dangerous, but so long as the passing game is that efficient, this is more than enough. Isaiah Pacheco with a 3.8 yard average per carry. I like looking at the average per carry more than the yardage totals, especially in an Andy Reid offense, because you're never quite sure what it is you're going to get. 3.8 there, that's a pretty decent number. You have 4.5 here for Kareem Hunt, but the big one there that I think we're going to continue to see is that 7-yard average for Mahomes. Now, the 28 yards for Mahomes this week, not particularly a big number. That doesn't matter anywhere near as much as this number does. The average for Mahomes, because what the average for Mahomes suggests is that, well, he's only tucking and running it when he sees a pretty good opportunity in front of him. This is not a quarterback who is going to scramble out of panic, right? He doesn't do that. If it's panic, he's fairly decent at throwing the ball away. Sometimes he gets tripped up before he can get that done, but he's not going to take a meaningless sack, and he's not going to go on a meaningless journey downfield. He sees an opportunity and takes it. The 3.8 yards for Pacheco, the 4.5 yards for Kareem Hunt, those are good enough to keep a defense mostly honest. Mostly. I am still a very large proponent of saying, hey, we need to go 4 wide receivers and a tight end on the field. Who cares about a running back at this point? Just motion Xavier Worthy across the formation to make them think you're going to run it with him. Which, by the way, 1 for 13 yards. Very, very good there. And while we're on this topic here, we have Brashard Smith, who is... The evolution continues with Brashard Smith. Not a whole lot of playing time so far this season, but Smith played 28 snaps against the Raiders and got 19 touches. That is an incredibly large percentage of his snaps that he was where he was called to get the ball. Now, some of those receptions, he wasn't called to get the ball, but he still got open. A lot of this is to see what he can do, right? A lot of this is because of the Chiefs' lead. They had a big lead, so you just take out your running backs, let Brashard Smith figure a couple things out there on an NFL field. But there is no question that the role being played by Smith has grown during the season. Here we have his week-by-week numbers here. Absolutely nothing down here in week 1. You see absolutely nothing there going on. He had nothing that first week. Since then, he had, in week 2, 1 carry and 1 target, but no receptions. In week 3, he had 2 carries and 1 target, no receptions. Week 4 against the Baltimore, remember that was a pretty big win, 37-20. He ended up with 4 carries and 4 targets. Now I'm counting targets more than receptions because that lets us know that he was the focus of the play. Then you had Jacksonville, which was an unfortunately close game. A game that was not won by the Kansas City Chiefs. Just 1 attempt and 3 targets, which suggests that when the pressure is on, he is being utilized more as a wide receiver or a target out of the backfield than he is a running back. When the game is close, he is not being given running back opportunities. Then you have Detroit, where he had 0 attempts, but 4 targets. Maybe not the closest game the Chiefs ever played, but it was fairly close by score fairly late in the game. And I think that this was an opponent that the Kansas City Chiefs really respected. So he's getting the opportunities as a receiver before a running back until you get to this Raiders game where the decimation was complete. And he ended up with not just 5 targets and 5 receptions for 42 yards, but also those 14 carries for 39 yards on offense with an 8-yard long. And frankly, look, the 2.8 yards per carry, not a good number. But frankly, he looked way better carrying the ball before he was the only running back in the game. He looked really good carrying the ball with that starting offensive line. And I would suggest, so it's, okay, well, yeah, of course he did. The Chiefs won 31-0. Of course he looked better when he was out there with the starters. Well, I think he looked better than Isaiah Pacheco. He does look like he has a penchant for breaking tackles. He does look like he's able to find the right hole all along the offensive line. He does look like he is able to use a defense's momentum against them. And he keeps getting very close to breaking off a big one. Keeps getting very close. We saw it on a screenplay against the Raiders where he was one guy away from taking it. It was like 60 yards, I think it would have been. And the final thing worth talking about here, Patrick Mahomes never left. All the naysayers, again, like we talked about earlier, there were a lot of injuries. There was injuries and a suspension. And you rarely get credit for the injuries. You never get credit for the suspensions, and probably that's understandable. Patrick Mahomes, however, never left. A couple down years where he went to the Super Bowl. A couple down years where Patrick Mahomes ended up winning the Super Bowl once and losing the Super Bowl a second time. He hasn't gone anywhere. This is a graphic shared by Brad Henson on Twitter. Patrick Mahomes has the most wins of any quarterback ever at or before 30 years old. Now, if you are particularly in tune with the Kansas City Chiefs, you know how absolutely insane this graphic really is. Why? Patrick Mahomes has 11 months where he is still a 30-year-old quarterback. Do you believe Patrick Mahomes has the opportunity to win 7 more games this year? I do. Which would put him at 100. He would be the first quarterback to ever hit 100 wins by or before turning 31. Now, here's another thing that doesn't get a whole... Here, I think it's easy to look at this graphic and just say, oh, well, there's Patrick Mahomes. Well, yeah. Here is the currently listed GOAT, Tom Brady, at 86. 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93. 7 wins ahead of Tom Brady. Now, Tom Brady had a very long career. This is a name that is not going to get, in retrospect, the respect that it had in the moment. Ben Roethlisberger, a lot of people forget this, was presumed, prior to this guy rising the way he did, Ben Roethlisberger was presumed to be the heir apparent to GOAT status. 2 very early Super Bowl appearances, a lot of wins. He started his career with 14 consecutive wins or something like that. I think it's something like that. But anyway, Ben Roethlisberger was seen for a brief period in time, maybe a 3 to 5 year stretch, that he was going to be the heir apparent because his success was immediate in the NFL. That is kind of what you have to have go right for you if you were ever going to have a claim to GOAT status. Well, it was true then. It is certainly true in the wake of Tom Brady because of all of those rings, all of those passing yards, all of those touchdowns. So this is a very insane graphic without even mentioning Peyton Manning, who is statistically, when you're talking statistics, one of maybe the GOAT, right? So Brady has him beat on numbers. Brady has him beat on duration. If you're talking about... So I break it down this way. I always think there's a greatest of all time and there's a best to ever do it. And then you've got your favorite, right? Everybody's allowed to have their favorite guy. My favorite running back of all time is Marcus Allen. I can't say that he's the greatest of all time. I can't say he's the best to ever do it. What's the difference between the greatest of all time and the best to ever do it? The greatest of all time is something that transcends the sport. Tom Brady transcends the sport. Usually it's through championships, but there is a cultural impact to the greatest of all time. The best to ever do it is normally someone who kind of came along and changed the way the position is played, the sport is played, something like that. He is the best technically at that position. So I say in boxing, Floyd Mayweather, Money Mayweather, is the best to ever do it. Played inside the confines of the sport, performed inside the confines of the sport to a better degree than anyone ever had. That's probably Peyton Manning. In boxing, the greatest of all time, anyone will tell you, it's Muhammad Ali. There is a larger pantheon of what it was that you can put Muhammad Ali's face onto, right? So that's the way I think about that. Here, in this graphic, Patrick Mahomes has more wins than the greatest of all time, more wins than the best to ever do it, and more wins than the guy who was supposed to be the next in line GOAT. So that is all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.